Hello, my name is Reverend Asha Burson Johnson. My personal pronouns are she, her, and it is my joy and my honor to be with you on this Wednesday Wisdom Talk. We come to this space every couple of weeks, the second and fourth Wednesday of the month. I'm the spiritual director of Center for Spiritual Living Port Angeles. And during this time of COVID and lockdown and all the other fun things we get to experience these days, this is the way that we are expressing our ministry. So I'm grateful to have you with me in this space. There's a bar on the side of this podcast, this live broadcast. There you can put in questions or comments or put in your 2 cents, because I'd really love to hear from you. So the topic tonight is creativity. And I've been thinking about this topic a little bit lately because I am probably known by a lot of people who know me as a very creative person. I've been creative since I was very small, and my family, my mother and father, fostered creativity in my brother and I very much, always having us look at things from a new creative angle, playing what we call the what else can it be game with ordinary objects, and making up songs, just a slew of creativity in my early life, which expanded into my adult life. My mom got my brother and I involved in community theater when we were young. I was 11, he was 9. That was a creative endeavor. I wrote poems. And then when I became an adult, I worked in retail for a long time, but then eventually, accidentally, fell into being a drama teacher in elementary schools for almost 30 years, which was extremely creative. I got to bring my creativity to the children, to the students, mostly K through 6th, and watch their creativity just flourish. I got to push their creativity limits a bit and help them grow. I was always amazed at how it took a while to rev up their creativity in the games that we would play and the way that we would interact together. But once I got them going, it was magical. And then years later, I dove into my spiritual life at the age of 35 through Centers for Spiritual Living and discovered a new way to be creative in my own expression and a way to bring the previous creativity of my early life and mix it together with this new sense of connection with spirit, the universe, oneness, God, love, energy, whatever you want to call it. So I like definitions. When I'm playing with a word, I like to see what Webster's dictionary has to say and what some of the other sources have to say about that word. So the Webster's definition is kind of boring. For such a creative word, it's kind of boring. Creativity is defined as the ability to create. Well, there you go. Doesn't give us much, does it? So I love to Google search things, and I Google searched and found an author named Robert Franken, and he wrote a book called Human Motivation. And in that book, he said, creativity is defined as the tendency to generate or recognize ideas, alternatives, or possibilities that may be useful in solving problems, communicating with others, and entertaining to ourselves and others. So that was interesting. And another author, I couldn't find a woman author that said specific things about creativity. So here are a couple of male authors. Richard Foster, who is a lecturer in management at Yale School of Management. He differentiates creativity both from innovation and discovery. He sees them differently. He says only creativity is about making something new rather than merely applying or discovering something new. Making something new. I like that distinction. A key to being creative, as Foster sees it, is the ability to find associations between different fields of knowledge, especially ones that appear radically different at first. The process is iterative rather than linear, and requires people with curiosity, energy, and the openness to see connections where others cannot, to find associations between different fields of knowledge, especially ones that appear radically different at first, and then make something new out of that. When I was in St. Louis and discovering my spiritual life, I knew it was there all along, but I discovered this particular philosophy, which helped my mind to understand what I had always known in my heart and my body, that there is only oneness, that there is this loving presence, that there is this energy that connects and unites all of life, that I can see and that I don't even know anything about. And then one day I was in the library and a book literally fell off the shelf at my feet, and it was called Truth in Comedy. And it was all about improvisation. Now, I've done theater for most of my life, but most of that was scripted theater. And I had not done a lot of improvisation. Although now I say, when we think that improvisation is hard, we have to just remember that when we get up every day, no one has handed us a script to say what we're going to be doing all day long. We improvise every moment of every day of our lives. So this book, Truth in Comedy, happened to fall into my consciousness, literally in front of my face, at the same time that I was doing a lot of study in the science of mind philosophy through Centers for Spiritual Living. And what I found fascinating and creative was that the spiritual truths that I was learning through Center for Spiritual Living and the rules of improv that I was learning in this Truth in Comedy book were the same. There is only one thing happening, and that is the present moment. Stay in the present moment. There are no mistakes. A former minister of mine later used to say, there are no mistakes, there's only research and development. I like that much better than a mistake. Go with what's happening. In other words, say yes to whatever's happening. And instead of yeah, but, say yes and see what you can add to what's happening to make things move forward. Qualities like that. So all of a sudden, I had a creative insight. I took the spirituality that I was learning and the improvisation that I was learning, and I smooshed them together, creating something new that I call spiritual improv. I use improvisation as a teaching tool, not so that people can become great improvisers and be on whose line is it anyway, but as a way to unlock our own inner wisdom, to discover and play with parts of ourselves that maybe we haven't given ourselves permission to express in a safe atmosphere where everybody's in the same place at different levels, and the way that people are good at some improvisation games and not good at others, and vice versa. So that for me was a creative insight, an example of taking two very disparate, appearing disparate fields of life, improvisation and spirituality, and finding a way to mush them together into something new. I've called myself a gleaner for years because I notice that I take a little bit of this and a little bit of that and a little bit of something else, and I put them together in new ways. And that's creativity. So that to me is creativity, this expressive way that all of us can tap into some inner wisdom that we have, begin to see something new and different than we've seen it before, and come up with a new creative way of expressing, maybe for ourselves, maybe for others. And so we get to look at who and what we think is creative, or what is creativity. We often think of artists, musicians, singers, theatrical people, dancers, and the like. We think of that as creative, the arts as a creative endeavor. When I first met my husband almost 30 years ago, I was a drama teacher, and he said, "Oh, you're so lucky. You get to be so creative every day." Now, he was a loan officer at that time, and he didn't see himself as a creative person. And I said, "Oh, no, you're very creative. What you can do with numbers and percentages and helping people to buy their first home by working their numbers in a particular way and looking at all of their financials and helping them to understand how to move forward in the process. That's so creative, something I could never do. It is not one of my gifts. I said, so I see you as extremely creative, just in a totally different way from me. And I think he started to see his work differently from that moment on. So, who and what is creative? Everyone. Everything can be creative. Creative can be destructive. It can be life affirming. Creativity can be expressed in a lot of ways. Hitler was really creative, but just not in the ways we normally think of creativity, not in the ways that engender life and beneficial experiences and growth for ourselves and others. COVID, the last several years, has been an interesting time for a lot of us. Maybe you, like me, have felt very stuck in your creative expressions. Big part of my creative expression had been doing weekly talks, planning for them, seeing what bubbles up from within, discovering how I want to come at a particular idea. And I felt like I had been stifled in that creativity when everything shut down and we could no longer meet in person. And many of my community did not want to do church on Zoom, which I understand. So we got to find creative ways to be together as community while not being together. And I think that's true for so many of us. We also got to find new creative hobbies that didn't require the presence of another. I discovered a love for jigsaw puzzles that I didn't even know that I had. And that, even though they're laid out and there's a picture and I'm following the order of that picture, I can't just make the puzzle go together in some other different way. But it felt really creative to me. It continues to feel very creative to me. I've discovered certain ways that I like to sort the pieces and ways that don't work for me anymore. So, can we find new ways to be creative when usual isn't? When we can't access what we've always relied on as a way to express ourselves creatively up until now. Creativity takes a few pieces in our consciousness to allow to rise up from within us so that we can express creatively, more creatively, in a way that serves us, that feeds us, and maybe feeds others as well. Our community, I'm part of the interfaith community in town, and out of the interfaith community came something called the Compassion Campaign for Clallam County. And out of the Compassion Campaign, we put a focus on food sustenance, food availability for people in our community as a way of expressing compassion. And out of that, we connected with this worldwide, but I know for sure countrywide and probably hemisphere-wide program called Little Free Pantries, places where people donate food to a little box in the front of your house or at the front of a church or by a library, and people can donate and take what they need. They can give what they can and take what they need. We now have about 14 or 15 little free pantries just in Clallam County, in Port Angeles and Sequim, and everywhere in between. And that was a creative expression that somebody had an idea. They had seen little free libraries all over the place. And they said, I wonder if we could do that with food. And they did. And then we found a website. And then we got creative with how we built them and how we spoke to people about, can you put this in front of your property, or do you want to do that? And how might that work? And every little free pantry in our community is what I would call self-sustaining. It has somebody or buddies that look after it, that tend to it, that make sure it stays stocked, make sure it stays clean. And they're very creative about the way they decorate them and advertise about them. Even the signage on every one is different. So who is creative? You are. Creativity takes courage, vulnerability, and the willingness to fail. or the willingness to, touching back on what I said earlier, to do research and development. When you think about scientists, and they try and they try and they try and they try again with their hypothesis. If they gave up every time it didn't work, we'd never have many of the things that we have in this life, the beneficial, beautiful things that have come out of that process. Think of all the artists that didn't know how to paint and they couldn't work with that particular medium. And they tried and they tried and they tried and they hated what they made. And then suddenly it clicked. Research and development and a willingness to fail over and over and over again until it clicks. Henry Matisse says creativity takes courage. And Edwin Land, who is an author and a teacher, said an essential aspect of creativity is not being afraid to fail. And Brene Brown, our beloved Brene Brown, says vulnerability is the birthplace of innovation, creativity, and change. Vulnerability is the birthplace of innovation, creativity, and change. Vulnerability means I don't know how to do this. And I'm willing to say, I don't know how to make this work. And I'm open to discovering how it might work. Again, one of my former minister teachers. I don't know what to do, but something inside me knows. I don't know how to make this work, but something inside me knows. Being vulnerable, being willing to say, I don't know. And something within me knows greater than I could possibly know in my limited imagination. It could be a great imagination, but compared to the imagination and the possibilities of the one life, we're just a drop in the bucket. But we have access to all the wisdom of all of life when we slow down, when we open to it, when we trust that what is for us is coming or is right in front of our face and we just haven't seen it yet. I have friends that take amazing nature photography, beautiful pictures of nature, and they see nature in a way that is so unique, unlike anybody else. It's not just a beautiful sunset or a pretty lake, which are lovely, they're great, but they get in very close to a pile of seaweed or some rocks or some driftwood, and then they become completely different landscapes. Creatively seeing what someone else misses completely because they have the courage to look, the vulnerability to say, what else is here for me? What else could I do with this? The old joke about, the pile of manure, there's got to be a pony in there somewhere. Well, that takes vulnerability and courage to sift through the manure time and time again and see what we can make grow out of that. So when usual isn't usual, we are called to creativity greater than ever before. I am called and you are called. I posted on Facebook a couple of days ago. I used to sew a lot. I sewed clothes for myself. I sewed clothes for theater, lots and lots of costumes for large theatrical productions. And I haven't sewn anything for probably 20 years. I think the last thing I sewed was my wedding dress, but nobody knew it was a wedding, so it was just a nice party dress. And then I was at the fabric store with my mom this last week, and a little bit of inspiration, a little bit of creativity. I looked at some patterns, I looked at some fabrics, and I came home with 3 patterns and 3 fabrics. And the other day I made a dress that's specifically mine, that nobody else owns because I made it. I used my creativity and I even changed the pattern just a little bit. I used some of those very old skills with some of the new knowledge about how this 60-year-old body works differently than my 30-year-old body used to work. and I made something new. What can you be creative in this week? Where can you play with creativity, maybe in a way you haven't before, up until now? I invite you to explore, to have courage, to be brave, to be vulnerable, and to do lots of research and development. Try a lot of things, trusting that you will know and feel that inner click when something speaks to you at a deep and resonant level that says, this is a way that I can express creatively, freely, and maybe new. You know, we've all heard the stories of Georgia O'Keeffe, who didn't start painting until much later in life. So it's never too late to try something new. Be creative. Take a breath. If you're here with me now and you'd like to say hello or just pop in with where do you feel most creative in your life, or what are you missing in your creativity? Anything you'd like to add into the comment bar, I'd love to see and hear from you. And if not, that's okay too. This is a space where I can be creative. And I look forward to hearing from those of you that have joined me either now or later. And in a couple of weeks, I hope to see you again. I hope you make it a great day. I'm grateful for your presence in the world and your creativity. And I invite you to deepen in it. I look forward to seeing you again. Bye.